Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. We're sponsored by Cosgrove Content, Wordsmiths for Industry. If you're in the manufacturing world and you struggle with communication around writing about what you do in a way people can understand, that's what Cosgrove is all about. So look us up at cosgrovecontent.com. And I'm really happy to be joined today by Ashleigh Walters. She's the president of Onyx, Inc. out in Pennsylvania, and she's going to tell us some really cool stuff. Hello, Ashleigh.
Hey, Jim. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. This is cool. You know, I heard your story, was it months and months ago when we first connected, and I don't think it fully got through to me, all the stuff you've been through. And then we reconnected here, a week or two ago, and I got much more about it and decided, yeah, this one has to get out there right away. So we're all over it. I'm glad you could jump on really quickly.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate you telling stories of manufacturers. Sometimes we're just behind the scenes making stuff happen and don't always get those stories out there. So your work is really important.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, it's a great point. Is we're okay with being behind the scenes, but with so much of what has to happen in today's world, we've got to get better at marketing ourselves. And I'm no marketer, but hey, if this helps us do that, then cool things.
Oh, yeah.
So welcome to the Wall of Metal. This is my kind of artsy rendition of what manufacturing is all about. My steel prints from my buddy Corey Bonnet out there, also in Pennsylvania, like you, and then all my heavy metal band posters. And so, yeah, first off, just tell us what Onyx does out there in PA.
Yeah, so we're heavily tied to the steel industry. So perfect background for this discussion.
Excellent.
Onyx started in 1966 here in Erie, Pennsylvania, and at the time there were about 60 foundries, I'm told, in town, and all we did was redistribute refractory materials to the foundries. Today that business model has changed to where the manufacturers of refractory sell direct to the end user and some through distribution, but as as times change, you've got to change too as a company.
Yep.
And so we started installing those refractory materials into the furnaces, and then we went on to start building the industrial furnaces themselves. So today, I always say that we service and maintain industrial furnaces inside and out.
It's so cool because, you know, to me, you guys are just this perfect example of how there's so much in manufacturing nobody ever thinks about, right? People think about steel mills for sure, but they never think about all the companies behind those steel mills that make them happen. And you're one of those.
We're one of those. We're one of the very first companies helping support supply chains for aerospace and defense and oil and gas. But you're right. Nobody thinks about how those end products get used or get made, I should say.
Yeah, right. And how the systems that make those end products get made, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool. Well, okay, let's shift gears then. Tell me about yourself. Tell me your background and what led you up to where you got into Onyx.
Yeah, so it started with a plant tour at my dad's pulp and paper mill. It's called Bowater at the time in a small town in Tennessee. And I just caught the manufacturing bug. So I always think about like walking down this pretty quiet hallway in the offices, and then these double doors swing open and the world is just entirely different on the other side. The machine is huge, it's loud, things are running fast. And I just, even telling you that story, I get chill bumps from it. So
that's cool.
I knew that's kind of where I needed to be, that manufacturing. And in this particular case, we were turning pulp, pine pulp into newspaper at the time. That mill's gone on to become a toilet tissue producing plant. But, you know, how cool is it to turn a pine tree into paper? Like, that's just really neat, right?
Yep.
And so I got that bug. I was good in math and science. So I went to Auburn University, another small town in Alabama, and studied chemical engineering, and my focus was pulp and paper. But if you remember back to 9/11, that was the fall of my senior year. I'll date myself a little bit. And the world changed, literally. that morning. And so at the time, people couldn't hire. I mean, it was a hiring boom, right? And then all of a sudden there were no jobs to be had. So I ended up in nuclear power instead of pulp and paper, because that was one of the industries where they had built the plants, but then they forgot to hire for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So they were in desperate need of young engineers. So that was what I did before Onyx.
All right. And so you're working in nuclear power and something happens that brings you into Onyx. So
Yeah.
let's hear all about that.
All right. So I had that pulp and paper background, and Onyx at the time was working very heavily in the Southeast in paper mills, installing chain systems in the lime kilns. And their pulp and paper technical salesperson and specialist passed away unexpectedly. So I was hired to become the technical sales in the Southeast for Onyx. So that's how I got my start in Onyx. My husband and I were running the Southeastern division, and it was his father's company at the time. So family-owned company. And then we had our first baby, and he decided to come 6 weeks early.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah. So his lungs weren't developed. He spent 2 weeks in the NICU, and it was flu season. And so he couldn't be in a daycare situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I went from thinking I would be a working mom to a stay-at mom literally overnight.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was a stay-at-home mom. We went on to have a second baby just a couple years later. And then in 2013, the fall of 2013, my father-in-law called one day and he said, Ashleigh, the CFO who was leading the company at the time has left the company. And he said, I need somebody to lead the company and just to take a look at the finances. Now, remember, I started off the conversation telling you this company is in Erie, Pennsylvania. That's where it's headquartered. And I'm sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina with two little ones. At the time, the boys were 3 and 4 years old. And so I could have said, now's not the time. I can't do this. I'm raising kids. But I didn't. Drew and I talked about it, and we knew, the company was in a financial distress situation, and we had 50 families that were depending upon us to get it right. It wasn't about our family. It was about those that were working for the company and trusted us. And so I didn't know how I was going to help, but I just said yes, and worked to figure it out.
No, you're an engineer by degree, right?
An engineer by degree.
So why did your father-in-law think of you for finance?
So I had told him the company had an accounting system that was DOS based, and none of the modules were tied together. So for instance, if you purchased something in the PO module, when the invoice came in, you had to re-enter everything into the AP module. And I just told him, I said, well, this worked years ago, and this is the best technology, like times have changed. So I said, if you will agree to purchase an accounting system, I will agree to help you get it implemented. And I did not know what I was doing, Jim.
Thank God for that, or it never would have happened, right?
Never have agreed to do it. But I learned a lot. I got pretty good at accounting pretty quickly, implementing an accounting system for him. So that's why he kind of naturally went to me to say, "Can you help?"
But since I know a little something of the story, you got really good at accounting, and that allowed you to find out some really bad stuff, right?
Yeah. So we were definitely in a tough spot as we started this journey, but I didn't know what was wrong. And so as I was reflecting today, thinking about our conversation, I remembered a story that one of my leadership team told me. He said, Ashleigh, you started pulling a string on a sweater and you unraveled the whole freaking sweater.
Yep.
You had to re-knit it. And it was so true. It's exactly what happened. I just started asking these curious questions, trying to understand where we were and what was going on and where people were facing issues. And so I would ask people, I would say, what frustrates you the most, or what takes up most of your time? And they would tell me, but you have to remember, they were led through fear. there was a very command and control leader in place. And so when I asked questions, they were afraid if they answered them that I was going to yell. But I didn't. I just said, oh, okay, well, let's work to solve this. You know, what resources do we need? Or maybe this is a report that you've been running for 10 years that nobody's even looking at anymore. Just stop, right? We found out we were like filing things 3 times. I mean, it was just crazy, redundant tasks that have just, showed up through the years. So as we started like getting rid of that waste, people started feeling better, and there was more trust and respect because we're not yelling about it when things go wrong. I even say that we have a freedom to fail here. If I ask you to be innovative, I have to allow you to experiment, and most experiments are not successful.
Right.
But you learn from each one. And so as long as we can talk about it and learn from it and not make the same mistake twice, right? Well, that's how we get better. That's how we continuously improve. So it was just through those questions that we rebuilt the trust and the respect.
I mean, it had to be just a breath of fresh air for the people there. Like you said, they'd been led through fear, which, that's the old school way of doing things, my way or the highway, top down model. But the trouble is then when things are going wrong, you can't frighten people into success, right? And so it just had to be marvelous for them to finally be listened to and actually start having some problem solved.
And I think as leaders, when you're in that command and control top-down model, you think you have to have all the answers and you have to figure out every step that every person's going to take. But I can tell you, like when COVID hit, we'd already kind of lived through this internal crisis together, right? So then now we have this huge external crisis. Nobody knows what's going on, and there's very little good data. And so I just gathered the entire leadership team around the table and I said, okay, this is what I've thought through. This is what I think that we need to be thinking about. What else have I not thought of? Right. And we started brainstorming and whiteboarding everything. And when you bring all those different perspectives together, we had such a much better plan coming out of that meeting than I could have ever created on my own. But the team was to the point where they were comfortable enough bringing topics to the table, right? They weren't sitting there silent. And then we all dispersed and had our own activities to do, to help mitigate and keep everybody healthy and safe. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so obviously you guys are still around, or I wouldn't be talking to you, at least not about this. Give us a top line on the changes that turned the business situation around, that got you guys back, with your feet under you.
So once again, it was creating that like people-centric culture where we were talking to people and listening to them and taking action upon their ideas whenever we could. At the same time, I mentioned that we are we're tied to the aerospace industry. Well, if you know anything about aerospace, you can't change anything, right? So sometimes, like when we're making these parts, like the guys would bring up, okay, well, if we could do it this way, it would be easier. And I would have to say, we aren't allowed to change it because. So just having that communication, yes, that's an awesome idea, but here's why we can't do it. That was really impactful. The other thing that we did was we used a lot of different lean tools. So lean for us is definitely a journey. It started for us with value stream mapping. So remember I told you that the previous manager had everybody siloed and nobody knew what was going on in the other departments in the company. Well, value stream mapping was an awesome way for everybody to come together at the same table and collaborate. And it really helped us understand that when we changed one process, like who we were affecting ahead and behind us in the processes. And gave people an opportunity to say, if you could just make this one little tweak, it would save me so much time. And, people are like, oh, no problem. Right? We can do that. Then we started 5S'ing the place. So we'd been in the building for 10 years and stuff had piled up in corners and we just dumpsters getting stuff out. But it makes you feel so much better when you clean it up and it's organized. You're not digging through boxes to find things or back in corners. And then we got to the point where we were using Kata to teach problem solving skills. So if you've lived in a command and control environment and you've been told everything to do every step of the way, then your problem solving skills probably aren't what they used to be. So you kind of have to rebuild that. So
Stop checking your brain at the door, right?
Yeah, using those lean tools was a great way for us to change the culture.
Yeah.
And now we talk about making things better. And for us, that is that continuous improvement. Everybody at every level of the organization thinking each day, what can I do? What little change can I make that will make things better? But I also tell our crew, like when you're on a plant site, because 75% of what we do is on somebody else's factory floor.
Yep.
I say, think about it. We need American manufacturing to be really strong. We need to be competitive here. If you're making the same repair over and over again, just stop a minute and go and ask, and let's see if we can make it better for them so that they're strong in their community and they remain in business too.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Share the success. So yeah, you obviously, so you and all your team saved the company, turned it around. And as you've said, you've continued with your lean, your continuous improvement, but you also made another huge change. You didn't rest on your laurels. You decided to take on another enormous task, and tell us about that.
Yeah, so in 2018, my husband and I bought the business from his father. We became 100% shareholders of the business. And so if you know anything about family businesses, the statistics say in the third generation, they're only 13% successful. And that's for a variety of reasons. But Drew and I knew that we needed to be really thoughtful when it came our time to transition the business. And so in 2019, it just happened that I was sitting on a succession planning panel because we had just purchased the business. So going from first generation to second generation. And the keynote speaker that day was there to talk about employee ownership. And so I caught up with Kevin McPhillips from the Pennsylvania Center of Employee Ownership after his keynote. And I said, Kevin, I love this model. Tell me more. What do I have to get Onyx to look like to make this be an option for us? And so I told him about the business and where we were. And he goes, Ashleigh, I think you actually are probably right there. Wow. And so we had a feasibility study done high level. And this is the end of 2019, the very start of 2020. When I went home to tell Drew about employee ownership, he said to me, Ashleigh, you clearly did not understand properly. This is not how this would work. And so we watched every YouTube video we could over the weekend. And he goes, you're right. This actually is true. This is a great model. And so for us, it felt really good because a lot of times, if private equity comes in and buys up a company, that they could close the doors or they could move it from the community, or you just don't know what's going to happen. And we felt really strongly, since this company's been based in Erie since 1966 and been family owned in one family or another since then, we wanted to make sure that this company remained for generations to come, not dependent upon our two boys. If they want to work in the business, awesome. But we don't feel like the families who are working here should have to be dependent on our family, right? They should share in this success. And so I think it was March 9th of 2020, I had Kevin come up and speak to our leadership team. I wanted everybody on the team to know what we were up to, because if any rumors started flying that we were selling the business, I wanted them to be in on it, right?
Yeah.
Kevin came up, he explained all about employee ownership, told him what a gift it was. And then March 13th happened. The school shut down that Friday. And then the next week, our governor here in Pennsylvania was shutting down non-essential businesses. Now, we were deemed essential, so we stayed open. But one of my leaders came to me and he said, well, I guess being employee owned is off the table. And I said, it's not. I said, it made great business sense in February, and it still makes good business sense today. I said, Drew and I plan on forging ahead. So I think we were only one of 3 companies that turned into an employee-owned company kind of in the height of COVID, of course, right? Only I would do that. I'm in the midst of a worldwide pandemic and transitioning.
What the heck?
I mean, why not?
Certainly don't shy away from a challenge, do you?
No, not. So our goal was to make the transition on June 30th, and we missed it just because of all the turmoil that was going on with the pandemic, right? We had to change banks and change trustees and get new insurance. It was just kind of a mess. But July 15th, we were able to make that transition. But we had to wait 6 weeks because it was summer outage season and none of our personnel were here. They were all busy until the end of August. So we had to keep it quiet for another 6 weeks. And I'd had a video done, Jim. It was so cool. I told everybody in March or February, maybe when we shot the video, that was for marketing purposes. I wanted to really humanize our brand and tell the stories of the craftsmen that are making these products and building this equipment. And everybody had done such a great job. So when we told them in August that we had sold the business, but we thought they'd really like the new owners, we showed them that video. And so it's all them. There was all these tears, they couldn't believe that we'd done it. One guy, one of my leaders came to me, he said, I don't understand why you gave us the keys to the castle. He said, but I'm, so thankful for that. So it's family business reimagined. That's what I say.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's an unbelievable story. And so then we reach the point where, now you've completely rested on your laurels and just taken it easy. So, oh no, wait a minute. Then you wrote a book.
Yeah, then I wrote a book.
Because you didn't want any spare time, right?
No, I had spare time. That's the funny part about it. So, September comes and now the ESOP transition's done and COVID's kind of calming down, but you're still not able to travel. Things are still shut down, right? And so my marketing coordinator said to me, she said, you need to write a book. And I said, I am an engineer. Like, we do not write. We write sentences. We don't write books. And she said, you've got to tell this story. She said, you've led through an internal crisis. Now you've led through a worldwide crisis. She said, there's people out there that just need a little hope, a little inspiration, and a playbook on how to get to the other side. And so in September, I decided I'd write a book, and I gave myself a December 1st deadline, which was crazy. Like, it's go better than that, but I hadn't written a book, so I didn't know better. I did publish it on December 8th, so once again, just a week late. That's probably pretty good in the midst of it all. But,
pretty amazing, yes.
Yeah, but I had an incredible.
Longer than that.
I had an incredible editorial staff and book designer, and they just all did a fantastic job to help me meet that goal. So the book is called Leading with Grit and Grace. And when I think about what is that book, what is it about? So for me, it's this grit, right? Every time change happens, every time a challenge is presented, it's just that determination and that resilience to get through it. And then grace is the human part of it. You're not on this journey of life alone. And you just have to have empathy and compassion for the people who are around you. I mean, COVID is the perfect example of how we had to be more empathetic and more flexible. Everybody was just in a different spot at a different time. And, as manufacturers, we're known for our grit, but we're not known for our grace. And so hopefully COVID has taught us a little more grace.
Yeah, that to me is a huge point in the manufacturing world. It's this history of, it's like we just revel in the difficulties and the dirt and grime and heat and cold and all the things that make it not so fun. But you guys have reveled in the fun, right? In taking care of people, in watching each other's backs and solving problems together. And to me, that's just such a model for how manufacturing, really should have always been. I can't fault the people who came before me because they did what they had to do to get by. But with what we've learned, manufacturing shouldn't be the way it has been historically.
No, I agree. I have a great example too, Jim, that came out of COVID. So when we were shutting everything down, no entrance into the plant, only half the management team here at one time, keeping our production personnel as safe as we could. I said, so my shipping and receiver manager came to me and he said, what about the truck drivers? And I said, well, I'm sorry, they just can't come into the plant. And he said, well, they come in and they use the restroom while we're unloading the truck. And I said, okay, I'm sorry, they'll just have to find somewhere else to go. And he said, Ashleigh, he says, they don't have anywhere else to go. The gas stations are closed. The rest stops are closed. Mm-hmm. I said, oh my gosh, you're right. And I said, okay, turn the women's restroom on the plant floor into the restroom for the truck drivers. That way we can just isolate, that group. So if we have any issues, like it's right there. And then he went one step further and set out a table of waters and snacks for them, so that as they left the plant, they were able to get water and snack. Because once again, there's nothing open, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just thought that, wow, have we come such a long way that we're not even just taking care of ourselves internally, but they're truly being kind to humankind.
Yeah.
And thinking about things that I didn't even know. I didn't even know that the truck drivers came into the plant to go to the restroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so back to my point, leaders don't know it all, right?
Right.
Like, we can't possibly.
Nope. Wow, that's awesome. So now you're going to rest on your laurels, right?
Oh, for sure.
Let's talk about looking out in the future. What's next for you? What's next for Onyx? What's in your mind as far as looking down the road for future success?
Yeah, so right now we're experiencing growing pains, which is a whole new change for us.
A good problem to have, but still a problem, right?
Great problem to have, but when you haven't been through it before, you don't quite know how you're going to get through it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's told you or not, but there's a labor shortage and a supply chain disruption issue.
No, you're the first one.
Oh, okay. Dang, I thought it was, not just me. Yeah, so we're experiencing this incredible growth, and here's what's going on. So the article's out there about reshoring manufacturing, right? So you're seeing all this new equipment built. You're seeing plants come back online. You're seeing equipment being retrofitted so that we can build here in America again.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, our vision for this company is to reignite American manufacturing, and what better time than right now. The other thing that you're seeing happen, and it was forced even faster because of COVID, is our baby boomers retired, and they took all that knowledge with them.
Yep.
So where a plant might have had maintenance staff before, now they're just using all their staff for production, and they're having to outsource their maintenance needs.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, that's growing our business. And so we're growing from a regional company right here in the tri-state area to we're being called across the nation now. But we're also being faced with this labor shortage. And so we've had to get really creative and find help in places that we wouldn't have normally looked. So 2 years ago, our Senator Dan Laughlin was here in the plant, and he told me about the Barber National Institute in town. And they have a workplace program. So they have we have 2 autistic gentlemen who now work in our facility. We were having trouble keeping up with housekeeping and packaging parts. And people who have autism really enjoy and thrive on repetitive tasks. So it was perfect. Yep. So these gentlemen have been with us for more than 2 years now, and I absolutely love seeing them come to work because they just run into the facility. They're happy to be here, and I am so thankful and grateful that they are here helping us.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then production entry-level positions have been a real struggle for us to hire as well. I was told about this great program, and it's across the U.S. For refugees and immigrants. And so we now have 2 Syrian gentlemen working in our production facility, and my Arabic is not good at all. In fact, I don't know any, and their English is limited, but Google Translate is awesome. So they turn on Google Translate on their phone, and so as we speak to them, it translates into Arabic for them, and as they speak to us, it translates back into English so that we can, cross that language barrier. So just finding, creative ways, and they're thrilled to be here too. They're thrilled to have the work. I'm thrilled to have them on our team, and it's just a different way to think about how do we grow? How do we meet the demand?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts there. Have you heard of Chobani's efforts with refugees? The yogurt company?
Oh, yes. I did actually.
MD Lakaya is an immigrant himself, the founder of Chobani. Yeah, so probably a good story you can look into there as far as how they handle that.
Yes.
One of their number one initiatives as a company.
Yes, I did just read an article about Chobani.
And actually, there are other pieces of your story to me that fit, because they did so many things with their employees. Not quite employee ownership, I don't think, but something akin to that. And then they wound up going public and making a bunch of people rich. So, nothing wrong with that.
Cliff Bar just got bought out.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
Employee owned, and they just got bought out, and their employees. So that's another great point. So we just celebrated our 2nd year as an employee owned company, and we got to give everybody their certificate or their stock certificates.
Mm-hmm.
So each year, as long as you've worked 1,000 hours and you're here at the end of the plan year, you get stock in the company. But each year we also have to have the company valued by an external firm.
Yep.
And so every year you get a statement that gives you your new shares and the new value of all of your shares. So our employees made 300% year over year. Now,
wow.
The stock market did well last year, right? 20%. Everybody's super
Yeah, not that well.
But our employees made 300% for themselves. So
wow.
The statistic is that they will have 2.5 times more in their retirement account than a traditional matched 401k. And it just, to me, that's just incredible. You know, they're here, they're the ones doing the hard work,
Exactly.
and then they're getting to participate in that growth.
Yeah, that's fabulous. The other point I wanted to make, you touched on really kind of throwing the net wider and where you look for employees. I've actually been involved in an initiative. It's rolling out here actually almost as we speak, called Tapping into Talent. And it's a website where you can connect with organizations that help with that kind of hiring. Employees from different groups that need that extra help can go on there and find assistance in getting hired. So it's not my doing. I've volunteered my time and effort to help support it, but I think it's a phenomenal tool. So something to think about as you look forward, look at that Tapping into Talent website. Right now focused on, you mentioned the autistic, people with disabilities in general, the formerly incarcerated, people who they've paid their debt to society, and yet we as a society then make it where they can't get a job, which really puzzles me, but hopefully we can help turn that around. And then one we didn't talk about is veterans. And veterans obviously bring enormous talents, and yet that transition can be so difficult because the worlds are so obviously very different. And so looking to help, especially folks like that who sacrifice so much for the country.
Yeah, absolutely. We have 3 veterans on staff, and
nice.
Just absolutely love having them as well. What I've heard with the veterans is we don't write our job descriptions in a way that makes that it's not their language from the military that we use in the private sector. And so it makes them feel like they don't have the skills when they actually really do.
Interesting. I'll have to keep that in mind. Yeah, so very cool stuff. Is there anything we haven't touched on? We've covered so much. You guys have so much going on, which is phenomenal, but anything else that we should talk about before we wrap up?
I can't think of anything else.
Well,
who knows what all.
This is what I love about what I do, is there's so many companies out there like yours doing amazing things that just don't get the attention, and not everyone's like you, where you get out there and write a book and start getting some attention for the phenomenal people that you've got on your team. And so, anything we can do to help promote the very cool things going on in manufacturing is just, to me, as a 30 plus year veteran, right on the spot of what we need to be doing. So I appreciate you being on, Ashleigh. Thanks so much for telling your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim.
All right. Well, we will have to connect more. I do think there's got to be a Forbes article about this too.
Oh, that would be awesome.
We should talk about that, because again, it's such a great story and such a great model for people who might be looking for answers too.
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest things is a lot of these family businesses don't know how to transition them. Right. So, an ESOP might not be a model that's perfect for everyone, and it certainly isn't, but just making sure you have a plan, I think, is the most important thing. I guess, let me leave you with this. So manufacturers, for every one job that we create, it's 4 jobs, support jobs in our communities. Right. And
Right.
so if you don't have an exit plan and the doors just close one day, when all those people are impacted, it's not just the 50 families that work for you.
That's
It's
right.
times 4.
Yeah.
And then I would argue that it's times 4 again for a family of 4. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
devastates communities when manufacturers close their doors.
Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, that's been happening too much in recent decades. And I love your point about stuff coming back, because I hope we're turning it around and we're going to head the other direction now.
I agree. It's important for our small towns.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do people find Onyx if they need refractory help?
So Emily Wilkins did an awesome website for us from Marketing Metal. It is onyxinc.com, ONEXINC.com. And out there you'll find everything we do with industrial furnaces, but if you need some resources for leadership, you'll find that resources page as well. And then feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and if you choose to buy the book, it's on Amazon.
Perfect. Again, Ashleigh, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.